Hey everyone, this is Tristain here again for another video. This time we're going to be responding from a question from Magnic, who is the player whom we've described in the past video. Actually, the point of the past video was to talk about, do some play-by-play analysis of myself versus him. And he appreciated the video very much, but he came to me with a question related to spin and the behavior of the ball in certain rallies that we had. And he even gave me an example with a timestamp from the video. And so we're going to be analyzing what's going on with the spin and how we can make sense of what's going on with the spin. I can read the question for you, or part of it, at the very least. So when I do a side spin serve, you push, I push. Then on your second touch, the side spin unfolds, but in reverse, so that the ball bounces to your left instead of to your right. Although from the point of view of just the return of my typical pendulum serve, it should be going to the right. And then he gives the example 1410 in the video, so I just made a clip from it. Let's watch together this rally. So side spin serve, backspin return, touch, backspin, and touch again, and then attack. So that was pretty much the rally. It kept going a little bit, but I just chopped out the non-relevant part. So the question is really about this part. This attack I do, well, it's more of a push with a vigorous, let's call it vigorous brushing in terms of side spinning and cork spinning the ball right here. Yeah, that's it. He's wondering, why is the ball moving this way and not this way? Because according to the way side spin works, according to theory and physics and stuff, it should be going the other way. And I totally get your question. But so there are two ways I can understand your question, but I think both ways will be covered by what I'm about to explain, as long as we can make sense of what's going on according to the usual rules of physics and what's supposed to happen with a ball. So I think there are a lot of videos out there explaining the basics of how spin works in terms of how the ball is supposed to behave when it hits a paddle that is immobile. But these videos don't usually do a very good job at explaining what happens when there is rushing added to the mix. I think most people will just consider this is too advanced or something, or this is not what beginners need. But there's a point where delving a bit deeper into spin, I think, can be very interesting, and it can clear up a lot of confusion around the concept of spin. So I would like to introduce some concepts of mine. It's not like I've invented anything here. I'm just using words that, in my opinion, best describe what I'm about to explain. They are the concepts of brush versus hit. This is already explained in some other videos out there. Replacing or reflecting the spin is something that I'd like to introduce, because I think a lot of people get mixed up with these two, and perhaps this is what's going on here. Also, there is this thing of cumulative effect, which plays directly into these two concepts. Then we can talk about ratios for these things and spin being expressed, etc. There are three planes of motion for spin to happen. A cork spin, which is a clockwise, anti-clockwise kind of spin, the side spin plane, and the top spin, backspin. These are the usual planes in which the rotation can occur. Now, what's most important for us is that we start by discussing the concept of brush versus hit. I want to make sure that everyone's up to speed with this. This is a very fundamental concept in table tennis, and I want to make sure that, yeah, we understand each other. So let's say this ball that's coming towards the rubber has topspin in it. Okay, if it's got topspin in it, then it's going to be rolling this way, right? And when it touches the paddle, it's going to go upwards, because it kind of digs into the rubber, and then friction and the elastic recoil and such make it so that the ball go back up. So it's like it's rolling, basically. You can figure a wheel going this way, and if the wheel is going this way on this surface, what is it going to do? It's going to go up, right? And then there is also the phenomena of reversal of the spin. So top spin from here translate into top spin this way, but there's a reversal of the spin going on because of Newton's third law. But I won't get into too much details about the reversal of the spin. That's not the object here. So there is this, and that's usually what people explain and understand, but they always do so bearing in mind that the rubber is immobile. Now, what happens if topspin comes, but we brush it, say with a chop? We go very straight down, as the concept names it. Here, we're talking about a brush and not a hit. So hit would be this, like this. This would be a hit in the horizontal plane. This would be brushing. I don't care whereas it's chop or a topspin or side spin, which I cannot represent here. It's brushing basically. So you can either brush or hit the ball basically. So that's the fundamental concept. And usually we do some sort of a combination of the two, something like that. So there are ratios between hitting and brushing. Maybe a smash will typically be something like 80% of a hit and 20% of a brush. A drive will perhaps be 50-50, a typical forehand drive. A loop will normally go more towards the brushing aspect. And there's some, differences in nomenclature in these things and what we mean when we say exactly these things. So, but there's this general concept that's very important, that there's a ratio that's going to be in here. Okay. Now there's a concept of replacing or reflecting. So reflection is what happens when we consider, for the most part, a ball that's coming on the rubber, where the rubber is immobile. There is a reflection going on. It's like you're reflecting the spin that's coming towards you. It's like you're a mirror. Your paddle is sort of a mirror, but there is also gravity involved. So it's not just a mirror. So reflecting or reflection is not a perfect term. It's just the best that I found so far. And so if there's top spin and it's going here, it goes up, and that's fine. Now, if we brush the ball going this way, let's say top spin, what ends up happening is we end up replacing the spin. We end up replacing, just like I just did right here. Replacing or we end up replacing the spin. So if we have sufficient brushing, the ball that's going to go back is not really going to care about whatever there was in there when it came first to us. It's just going to be the spin that we imparted, we infused it with. So in order to do that, we have to match the spin. So let's say the top spin coming towards me is 80 top spin. Then I have to produce a brush that has at least 80 top spin, so that I'm in full control of where the ball is going to go. If I don't brush it sufficiently, then reflection is going to happen, and the ball is going to move in a direction which perhaps I won't be able to predict completely. Or perhaps I can predict it, but then I have to compose with that. I have to compose with the reflection. And that's what we do when we touch the ball, for instance. When we just block or we touch the ball, this is what we have to do. This is what we have to deal with. And now that plays into the cumulative effect thing. So if someone sends a topspin ball, which is very powerful, let's say it's got 100 topspin, and I just reflected, then it's going to go back with maybe 80 topspin because there was some friction going on in there. So 80 topspin is going back. And so there is a cumulative effect. From the 100 topspin here, there's now 80. And if the other player also just reflects it, maybe now it's going to be something like 50, So we could play like this until there's no more energy because of the friction, from the friction on the air, friction on the table, friction on the rubbers. Eventually, it's just going to wear down. But as long as we keep touching, or we don't compensate fully, or we don't brush the ball sufficiently to cancel out the spin, then there is a cumulative effect, right? So we have to bear in mind that, sure, we should be considering what will happen during a reflection of a ball. So since we were discussing side spin, well, side spin from the viewpoint here, from a top view, will produce a ball that goes something like this, let's say, and when it hits the paddle, then it is going to go, in this case, that would be this way. If it was a pure reflection, or let's say we're not, as I said before, we're not compensating, we're not canceling out or replacing the spin properly, then it's going to go this way. But as long as we brush it sufficiently, then whichever amount of spin was in there is not going to be reflected in the return of the ball. It's just not going to be there anymore. So we have to take that into account when we reason about spin in table tennis. And so that's the thing, right? It's just we have to look at each point of the rally or just each moment of the rally and ask ourselves for each stroke, okay, how much reflection is in there and how much replacement is in there, so that we know whether we should think in terms of cumulative effect or not. So let's just resume the video from here. So we've got this. I'm just going to slow it down here. So 0.25. So you can tell that, okay, let's just imagine the amount of spin in there. Let's just try to do a guessing game in here. So look at this amount of side spin here. So this is 0.25 spin. I don't know, maybe there's something like 60 points, 60 units of spin in there. And now I'm going with this. Look at the motion of my brushing, the direction. How much have I canceled from this spin and how much has been reflected? Well, if you look at the motion of the ball following my stroke, we're going to have a pretty good idea of this. Is there side spin in there? There was side spin there. That was very clear. But is my ball going in? Is it going in a straight line or is it going in a curvy line? Well, if you just look at the ball's trajectory, you can see it's fairly straight. I mean, I sent it here with a direction going there, and it went in a pretty straight line. So whichever side spin was in there has pretty much been canceled by my own brushing. And that's a very important aspect of it. So at this point, the initial side spin serve doesn't bear any effect on the following strokes or on the following trajectories at this point from the second bounce, from the second stroke moving forward. And now, look at what's going on. This is a touch, or a touch with a very slight lift in there, right? So since it's a touch, as I said, because there's not a lot of brushing action, there's going to be more of a reflection. So now we can really see, we've got even more details about what was contained within that ball prior to reaching that paddle. So we can see, if we look carefully at the trajectory of the ball, that the ball deviates to the right of my opponent, even though he was covering it by orienting his paddle this way, which is correct. And so this deviation is not side spin, actually. It's mostly cork spin. And we know that because the trajectory of the ball wasn't very curvy. It was just mostly straight. So it probably wasn't so much side spin. It was probably more like cork spin. So there was some cork spin that I perhaps imparted in the ball here. And then it reaches the table. At first, with the first bounce on the table, you don't see the cork spin so much, probably because of the speed of the shot. The speed makes it so that we don't feel the cork as much. But then when it reaches his paddle and it's already lost some of its speed, then the cork is expressed a bit more. So the ball was turning this way, anti-clockwise, and so logically, reaching the paddle, it goes this way slightly. At least for the first part, and you can tell it's going this way, even though the paddle was oriented this way, the cork spin makes it go the other way around. And now, yeah, it's going again in pretty much a straight line. So we compensated for my initial spin, and now it's going back into a straight line. So again, not much side spin, because if it had side spin, it would be curving, but it's not. So the cork spin has pretty much been expressed. And now this ball is pretty much empty, except perhaps for the backspin from the other shot I put in there. So I did say there was probably some cork in there, cork spin, like this. Actually, not this one, before. So there was my receive here. So we said there's cork spin in there, but there's backspin too. And the backspin explains why the ball, sure, it deviates, but it also kind of catapults forward. So that's why it can go across the net, even though he almost didn't put any energy in it. Just a very slight uplift touch. Up and slightly forward. Yeah. So the backspin explains why it goes back. But again, the backspin is already depleted in some fashion because of the friction. And now I'm dealing with a ball that's got probably just some backspin in there. Not a lot of top or side or cork. It's a pretty basic ball. And so whatever I'm going to infuse this ball with, as long as I brush it with a decent amount of brushing, then it should go wherever I'm orienting my paddle, basically. And this is exactly what happens. If you look here, you can clearly see that my paddle is pointing this direction. And I'm brushing sideways, so I'm applying sufficient brushing on the ball. So I'm canceling, again, I'm replacing the spin that was contained in the ball that was coming my way. And so I just end up creating a ball that has quite a bit of cork and side. It's quite angled, it lands straight on the line, and so it corks to the right of my opponent, and that added to the side spin of it, so it ends up going pretty far to his right, so he has to reach. And in his comment, he told me he thought he was pretty dumb not to have attacked it, but actually it's well, it was far, it was a far reach. I mean, with sure a better read on the ball and better anticipation and footwork, he could have attacked it, but the spin I infused in the ball made it so that it was kind of difficult. But that's the whole point, really. I hope this made clear the idea that every time you try to make sense of what happens with the ball, you got to consider these things: replacing the spin or um, and reflecting the spin. If you're reflecting the spin, sure, you're going to have to compose with cumulative effect later on until someone brushes the ball sufficiently to kind of reset the spin to something else. We reset it when we brush the ball sufficiently. We don't just cancel the spin, we add our own spin to the ball, and we kind of reset the way that we have to think about the spin. Now, bear in mind that most of the time, we don't just replace or um, we don't just replace or reflect the ball, right? We don't just replace or reflect. We do some sort of a combination of both. So that's where table tennis becomes kind of tricky. The key aspect is, I think, is that, well, if you just have enough speed in your brushing, you won't have to worry too much about the reflecting. That's why working on speedy brushes is really the way to go in order to become a better table tennis player. But then if you want to learn to play short games and be able to do a beautiful touch like Magnic does right here, I think it's, yeah, right at this point, like a touch like this requires you to know how to orient the paddle. If you want to be able to do something like that, then yes, you have to know a bit about how the side spin and cork spin, these things work, but you don't necessarily have to know about them theoretically. You have to know them in a practical way. I'm sure there are plenty of players out there who will have the reflex of orienting the paddle this way, but who won't be able to explain to you why they did it and how the physics work in a theoretical kind of way. It needs to be absorbed at a fundamental, practical level. So I hope this was clear, and hopefully this will help a few people out there. And thank you for your question, Magnic, and hopefully we'll keep interacting in the future.